You learn early that loving a pirate means accepting a wound that never heals. Before the first kiss, before the first whispered promise in the dark, there is already a hidden cost, a silence that gnaws at your insides, patient and hungry, waiting to collect its debt in blood when you least expect it. Now, as the sea roars like a starving beast beneath the harbor walls, you feel that price rising in your chest. Something is coming, something you cannot name yet, but your bones already know. They have known for months, perhaps years. You simply refuse to listen. You stand at the window of your small stone house, fingers pressed against the cold glass. The village below huddles against the wind, smoke curling from chimneys like prayers escaping toward an indifferent sky. Fishermen mend their nets with calloused hands. Women carry bread wrapped in cloth, their eyes darting toward the horizon. Everyone watches the sea here. Everyone fears what it might bring. But they do not fear what you fear. Your husband is a name whispered with hatred and fascination in the damp taverns along the coast. They call him the Black Wolf of the northern waters. They say he has sent more souls to the depths than any storm. They say his ship appears from the fog like a nightmare given wood and canvas and disappears the same way, leaving only wreckage and widows behind. They do not know him the way you do. They do not know how his hands tremble when he sleeps, fighting battles that ended years ago. They do not know the scar hidden beneath his collar, the one he earned protecting a boy who was not his own. They do not know the letters he writes to you, letters soaked in salt and something that might be regret, letters you burn before anyone can find them. You are the monster's wife. That is all they see. When he sails away with black sails and broken promises, you remain. You remain with the smell of salt embedded in every thread of your clothing. You remain with the creak of floorboards echoing in your memory like ghostly footsteps. You remain with the stares that strip you of respect and dress you in shame. The baker's wife crosses the street when she sees you coming. The priest offers prayers for your soul without being asked. Children run past your door, daring each other to touch the cursed threshold. You have become a warning, a cautionary tale mothers tell their daughters about the dangers of loving the wrong man. No one asks what you lose with every dawn he is gone. No one asks about the nights you spend awake, counting the hours until his return, counting the reasons you should want him to return. No one asks about the weight in your stomach, heavy as an anchor, pulling you deeper into a darkness that has no name. The nights are long and sharp as blades. Wind slices through the cracks in the walls like frozen fingers reaching for your throat. Every distant sound announces his return, or something worse. You pray, but your prayers taste like fear. You pray for him to come back alive. You pray for him to never come back at all. This contradiction consumes you, because there is a thought buried so deep inside you that you cannot confess it aloud, a thought that would make you a traitor to your own heart. A thought that whispers in the voice of the girl you used to be, before love became a cage with invisible bars. You know something no one else knows, and that knowledge is slowly killing you from the inside out. You remember the night he told you the truth. It was 3 days before your wedding, and the world still seemed full of possibility. The moon hung low over the harbor, casting silver light across the water, and you believed, truly believed, that love could redeem anything. He found you on the cliffs, where you often went to escape your father's drinking and your mother's silence. The wind was gentler then, or perhaps you simply did not notice its cruelty. You were young, you were foolish. You thought the ache in your chest was passion, not warning. His name was not yet a curse on the lips of strangers. He was simply Elric, the shipwright's apprentice with dark eyes and a crooked smile that made your heart stumble. He brought you wildflowers stolen from the churchyard. He told you stories about distant lands where women wore silk and men bowed to queens. He made you feel seen in a world that had always looked through you. That night, he did not bring flowers. His hands shook when he reached for yours. His voice cracked like a boy's, though he was already a man grown. And when he spoke, the words fell between you like stones dropped into still water, sending ripples that would eventually become waves, then storms, then the wreckage of everything you thought you understood. He told you about the ship, not the fishing vessel he pretended to repair during the day. The other one. The one hidden in the cove beyond the old lighthouse, where the rocks kept honest sailors away. The one with black sails folded like sleeping wings, waiting for the moment when pretense would no longer be necessary. He told you about the crew. 12 men with nothing left to lose. Deserters from the King's Navy. Orphans raised in alleyways where survival was the only law. A priest who had lost his faith and found something darker to worship. Each of them bound by a promise sealed in blood and desperation. He told you about the plan. 3 merchant vessels would pass through the strait within the month, carrying gold meant for a lord who had burned his own villages to punish them for a failed harvest. The same lord who had hanged Elric's father for stealing bread. The same lord who had sold Elric's sister to pay a debt she never owed. Justice, he called it. The word tasted like iron in your mouth. You should have walked away. Every instinct screamed at you to run, to forget his face, to pretend this conversation never happened. You could have married the miller's son, who smelled like flour and looked at you with simple, uncomplicated wanting. You could have lived a small life, a safe life, a life where the sea was just water and ships were just wood. But he looked at you with those dark eyes, and you saw something something that stopped your breath. He was afraid. Not of the danger ahead, not of the law or the Lord or the hangman's rope. He was afraid of losing you, afraid that the truth would send you running like everyone else who had ever learned what he really was. You recognized that fear. You had worn it yourself. Every time you hoped someone might love you despite your father's shame, despite your family's poverty, despite the whispers that followed you through the village like shadows you could never outrun. So you made a choice. You took his hands in yours. You looked into his eyes, and you spoke the words that would chain you to him forever. You said yes. The wedding was small and silent, witnessed only by the waves and a drunk priest who forgot your name before the vows were finished. You wore your mother's dress patched in 3 places and smelling of lavender she had pressed between the folds years ago. He wore his father's coat, too large in the shoulders, as if he was still growing into the man he was trying to become. There was no celebration, no dancing, no music, no family gathered to wish you well. Your mother had died the winter before, coughing blood into rags you burned without ceremony. Your father did not come. He said you were dead to him the moment you chose a shipwright's apprentice over the miller's son and his father's comfortable money. You did not mind. You told yourself you did not mind. That first night in the small room above the chandler's shop where Elric rented a bed, you learned what it meant to belong to someone. His hands were gentle, his whispers were sweet, and when he held you afterward, tracing patterns on your skin like maps of places you might someday see together, you almost believed the lie you were building. Almost, because even then, you could feel the weight of what you knew pressing against your ribs. The secret sat between you like a third presence in the bed, breathing its cold breath on the back of your neck while you pretended to sleep. The first raid happened 3 weeks later. You heard about it from the fishmonger's wife, who heard it from a sailor, who survived only because he hid beneath the bodies of his crewmates until the pirates left. A merchant vessel bound for the southern ports, carrying silk and spices and a chest of gold coins meant for a wedding dowry. The crew was killed or scattered. The cargo vanished, and a black-sailed ship disappeared into the morning fog like it had never existed. The village buzzed with fear and excitement. Pirates were rare in these waters, or had been until now. Old men gathered in the tavern, arguing about defenses and patrols. Young men boasted about what they would do if they ever faced such villains. Women clutched their children closer and checked their locks at night. You said nothing. You scrubbed the floors. You mended the nets Elric pretended to use for fishing. You smiled at the neighbors who still spoke to you, and you pretended not to notice when they stopped. You cooked meals you could not taste, slept in sheets that smelled like salt and secrets, and waited for him to come home with blood on his hands and lies on his tongue. He always came back clean. He was careful that way, but you saw the truth in the tremor of his fingers, in the shadows beneath his eyes, in the way he held you too tightly, as if afraid you might dissolve like morning mist if he loosened his grip. You knew what he had done, what he continued to do, what he would do again and again until the sea finally claimed him or the law caught up with its patient, relentless hunger. And still you said nothing. At first you told yourself it was love. You loved him, and love meant acceptance, meant forgiveness, meant closing your eyes to the darkness so you could keep holding on to the light. He was not evil, you reasoned. He was wounded. He was seeking justice in a world that had offered him none. But as the months passed and the raids continued, you felt that reasoning crumble like wet sand beneath the tide. The victims had faces now. The fishmonger's nephew, who sailed on a merchant ship to save money for his wedding. The widow on the hill, whose husband never returned from what should have been a simple trading voyage. The children who would grow up fatherless, just as Elric had, perpetuating a cycle of pain he claimed to be fighting against. 2 years passed, like stones sinking slowly through dark water. You learned to measure time not in seasons, but in departures and returns. Each goodbye carved a new line into your face. Each homecoming brought relief tangled so tightly with dread that you could no longer tell them apart. He changed your husband. The crooked smile appeared less often. The stories about distant lands stopped altogether. When he looked at the horizon now, his eyes held something you recognized from your own reflection, a weariness that went deeper than bone. The crew changed too. Names disappeared without explanation. New faces appeared, harder and hungrier than the ones before. The priest who had lost his faith was found floating in the harbor one morning, his throat opened like a second mouth. No one spoke of it. No one dared ask. You learned to read the signs of a successful raid, the tension in his jaw when he walked through the door, the way he avoided your eyes while washing his hands, scrubbing longer than necessary, as if trying to remove stains only he could see. The coins he pressed into your palm without explanation, always enough for another month of pretending to be ordinary. You learned the signs of failure too, the silence that stretched for days, the nightmares that made him cry out in languages you did not recognize, the bruises he tried to hide beneath his sleeves, purple and yellow maps of violence you were not supposed to know about. The village began to suspect expect. It started with whispers, so quiet you could almost pretend not to hear them. The shipwright's apprentice who never seemed to work, the wife who had more coins than her station should allow, the couple who kept to themselves, who attended church but never confessed, who watched the sea with eyes that knew too much. Then the whispers grew teeth. The baker stopped selling you bread. He claimed he had run out, but you saw the loaves stacked behind him, still warm from the oven. The seamstress refused to mend your dress, her hands suddenly full with other work. Children threw stones at your door, dared by their friends to anger the witch who had married a demon. You were not a witch. You were something worse. You were complicit. Every meal you cooked with stolen money made you complicit. Every night you spent in his arms made you complicit. Every morning you woke and chose not to speak made you complicit in the blood he spilled, the lives he ruined, the widows he created with his ambition and his rage. The guilt grew like a tumor in your chest, pressing against your lungs until breathing became a conscious effort. You stopped eating, not from hunger, but from the nausea that accompanied every swallow. You stopped sleeping, not from insomnia, but from the faces that waited for you behind your closed eyelids, asking questions you could not answer. Why did you not stop him? Why did you not warn us? Why did you choose him over us? You had no answers. Only the terrible truth that you loved him still, loved him despite everything, loved him with a devotion that felt less like warmth and more like chains wrapped around your throat. One night he came home wounded. A sword had caught him across the ribs, opening a gash that bled through 3 layers of bandages before you managed to stop it. You worked in silence, your hands steady, even as your heart screamed. You stitched his flesh together with thread meant for sails, and you pretended not to notice the tears streaming down his weathered face. Afterwards he spoke. He told you about the ship they had attacked, a passenger vessel, not the merchant they expected. Families aboard, children crying, women begging for mercy. His men had wanted blood, demanded it as payment for the risks they took. He had tried to stop them. He had failed. 43 souls, he whispered. 43 souls sent to judgment, and he could save none of them. You should have left him then. That night, with his confession still hanging in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre, you should have gathered your few belongings and walked into the darkness. You should have found passage on any ship sailing anywhere, should have started again with a new name in a new place where no one knew the weight of your sins, but you stayed. You told yourself it was because you had nowhere else to go. Your father had drunk himself to death the previous spring, choking on his own vomit in the bed where your mother once slept. You had no siblings, no cousins willing to claim you, no friends brave enough to associate with the pirate's wife. The world outside that stone house was vast and indifferent, and you were terrified of facing it alone. That was the lie you wrapped around yourself like a threadbare blanket. The truth was simpler and uglier. You stayed because leaving would mean admitting that you had been wrong, wrong to love him, wrong to believe him, wrong to sacrifice your soul for a man who had long since lost his own. Pride is a quieter killer than guilt, but no less effective. So you remained. You washed the blood from his shirts. You counted the coins that appeared in the locked box beneath the floorboards. You smiled at the neighbors who still acknowledged your existence, and you pretended that the screams you heard in your dreams belonged to someone else's conscience. Months became years. The raids continued, though less frequently now. Elric spoke of retirement, of taking the accumulated fortune and sailing somewhere warm, somewhere no one had heard his name or seen his black sails. He painted pictures of orange groves and white sand, of a small house by the sea where you could grow old together, finally free. You wanted to believe him. God help you. You wanted to believe, but you knew better. Men like Elric did not retire. The sea was in his blood, the violence woven into his sinews. Even if he managed to walk away, the ghosts would follow. They always followed. They would find him in the peaceful nights, in the gentle mornings, in every moment of quiet that reminded him of all the noise he had created. And they would find you too, because you were not innocent, no matter how desperately you clung to that delusion. You had made a choice that night on the cliffs, 3 days before a wedding that should never have happened. You had chosen love over morality, passion over principle, him over everyone else who would suffer for your decision. The 43 souls from the passenger ship were your victims too. You carried them now, their faces joining the growing chorus of the dead that accompanied your every waking moment. The fishmonger's nephew, the widow's husband, the children left fatherless, and now 43 more innocents caught in a trap you had helped set simply by remaining silent, simply by staying. The secret you kept was no longer just about Elric. It was about you, about the woman you had become, the compromises you had made, the lines you had crossed while telling yourself you were standing still. You knew the location of every raid for the past 4 years. You knew the names of every crew member still breathing. You knew the cove where the black-sailed ship waited, and the schedule by which it emerged to hunt. You knew enough to destroy him. And the terrible, shameful truth was this: part of you wanted to. Part of you imagined walking to the magistrate's office, laying out every detail with clinical precision, watching the soldiers march toward the cove with torches and swords. Part of you imagined the trial, the confession, the rope around his neck. Part of you imagined finally being free of the weight, finally being able to breathe without the ghost pressing down on your chest. But another part, the part that remembered why wildflowers and whispered promises, and the way he looked at you like you were the only light in a very dark world. That part could not bear to betray him, so you remained frozen, trapped between love and justice, between loyalty and truth, between the woman you were and the woman you were becoming. And now, as you watch his ship appear on the horizon for the first time in 3 months, you realize that the moment of choosing can no longer be delayed. The ship cuts through the morning mist like a blade through flesh, its black sails swollen with wind that smells of salt and something darker. You watch from your window, fingers pressed so hard against the cold glass that your knuckles turn white as bone. Your heart pounds against your ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape its cage. He is coming home. 3 months of silence. 3 months of wondering if the sea had finally claimed him, if some Navy vessel had caught him, if his own crew had turned against him the way wolves turn on a weakened alpha. 3 months of lying awake in the empty bed, reaching for warmth that was not there, hating yourself for missing it. Now he returns, and you do not know if the tears burning your eyes are relief or terror. The village stirs below. Fishermen pause in their work, nets forgotten in their weathered hands. Women gather children close, pulling them indoors with urgent whispers. The church bell does not ring, but you can feel the collective breath being held. An entire community frozen in the grip of ancient fear. They know that ship. Everyone knows that ship. 3 years ago it was just a rumor. 2 years ago it was a nightmare that visited occasionally. Now it is a plague, a curse upon these waters, and everyone knows whose door it darkens when it makes port. They know, and they watch your window with eyes that accuse without speaking. You turn away from their judgment. You have carried its weight for so long that it barely registers anymore. Just another stone in the mountain pressing down on your shoulders. The house feels smaller than usual as you move through it, checking locks that will not stop anything, straightening furniture that does not need straightening. Nervous hands seeking occupation while your mind races through possibilities you cannot control. What has he done this time? Whose blood stains the deck of that black-sailed nightmare? How many new ghosts will join the chorus that haunts your dreams? And beneath those questions, darker ones you dare not speak aloud. Does he know? Has someone betrayed your hesitation, your doubt, the treacherous thoughts you have entertained in his absence? Does he return as husband or executioner? The door opens without warning. He stands in the frame, silhouetted against the grey morning light, larger than you remembered and somehow smaller at the same time. The months at sea have carved new hollows in his cheeks, new shadows beneath eyes that once sparkled with mischief and now burn with something you cannot name. Salt crusts his dark hair. A fresh scar traces a path from his left ear to his jaw, pink and puckered, still healing. His clothes hang looser on his frame, as if the sea has been eating him slowly, consuming him bite by bite. But it is his eyes that stop your breath. They hold something you have never seen before, something beyond weariness, beyond guilt, beyond the familiar shadows of violence and regret, something that looks almost like fear. Elric fears nothing. You have watched him face storms that swallowed ships whole. You have seen him stare down men twice his size without flinching. You have held him through nightmares that would break lesser souls, and even then, even screaming in his sleep, he showed no fear. Until now. He crosses the room in 3 strides and pulls you against his chest. You feel his heart hammering through layers of salt-stiffened cloth. Feel the tremor in his arms as they wrap around you. Feel the desperate pressure of his embrace as if he is trying to absorb you into himself. He does not speak. He does not need to. Something has happened. Something has changed. Something has broken inside him during those 3 months at sea, and you can feel the sharp edges of it cutting you both. You hold him in the silence of your small house, and you wait for the confession that you know must come. He tells you everything that night, words spilling from his lips like blood from an open wound. You sit across from each other at the small wooden table, a single candle flickering between you, casting shadows that dance like restless spirits on the stone walls. The raid went wrong from the beginning. Their target was supposed to be a merchant vessel, carrying weapons for a distant war, cannons and swords and gunpowder, meant to kill strangers in a conflict that had nothing to do with these waters. Easy prey, Elric said. No innocents aboard, just mercenaries and war profiteers who had chosen their fate the moment they loaded their cargo. But the information was wrong, deliberately wrong. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had fed them lies wrapped in truth, had led them to a trap so perfectly constructed that even now, 3 months later, Elric cannot understand how they survived it. 3 Navy ships waited in the fog, 3 warships armed with cannons that turned the morning into thunder and fire. His crew of 30 was reduced to 8 before they managed to flee, leaving behind men who had fought beside him for years, men whose names he speaks now with the reverence usually reserved for prayer. Thomas, who had joined them as a boy and grown into the finest helmsman on the northern coast. Margaret, the only woman brave enough to sail with pirates who could throw a knife with deadly accuracy and sing songs that made even hardened criminals weep. Old Samuel, who claimed to be 60 but was probably older, whose knowledge of tides and currents had saved them more times than anyone could count. Gone. All of them gone. Elric's voice breaks when he speaks their names, and you realize you are witnessing something you never expected to see. The Black Wolf of the Northern Waters is weeping weeping, tears cutting tracks through the salt and grime on his weathered face. But that is not the worst of it. He tells you about the escape, the desperate flight through treacherous waters while cannon fire turned the sea to foam. He tells you about the island where they finally found shelter, a rocky outcrop barely large enough to beach the damaged ship. He tells you about the fever that swept through the surviving crew, killing 2 more and leaving the rest weak as children. And he tells you about the message, a bottle washed ashore on the 3rd day, sealed with wax that bore a familiar symbol. Inside, a single sheet of parchment covered in handwriting he recognized immediately, the Lord of the Eastern Province. The same Lord who had hanged Elric's father and sold his sister. The same Lord whose gold they had stolen years ago. The raid that started everything. The first domino in a chain that had led to this moment of reckoning. The message was simple. The Lord knew everything. He knew the location of their hidden cove. He knew the names of every crew member still breathing. He knew about the village, about the stone house by the harbor, about the wife who waited there with secrets of her own. And he was coming, not for Elric, not directly. The Lord was smarter than that, more patient, more cruel. He would not risk his soldiers against a cornered wolf when there was an easier path to vengeance. He was coming for you. The words hang in the air between you, heavy as anchors, sharp as the sword that carved the new scar on his face. You feel them settle into your bones, feel them rearrange everything you thought you understood about your situation. The Lord is coming for you, not to kill you. That would be too quick, too merciful for a man whose cruelty is legendary. Even in a world full of cruel men. No, he intends something far worse. He intends to take you, to use you, to transform you into a weapon against the husband who stole from him. Elric grips your hands across the table, his fingers cold and rough with calluses. His eyes burn with a desperation you have never seen, not even on the night he confessed his plans 3 days before your wedding. He has a plan, he says, a way out, a path to safety that will require sacrifice but might save you both. The remaining crew is preparing the ship even now, making repairs by moonlight, loading supplies for a journey that will take them far from these waters. They will sail south beyond the reach of the Lord's influence, beyond the maps that naval officers study, beyond everything familiar and safe. There are islands in the distant seas where men with pasts can build futures, where gold buys silence and skill buys respect. He wants you to come with him. The words should bring relief. Escape has been your fantasy for years, the dream you cling to when the guilt becomes unbearable. A new life, a clean start, a chance to become someone other than the pirate's complicit wife. But something stops you, something catches in your throat, blocking the yes that should flow so easily. You think of the 43 souls from the passenger ship. You think of Thomas and Margaret and old Samuel, dead now because of a betrayal that might have been prevented. You think of all the widows and orphans created by the black-sailed ship and its hungry crew. You think of the secret you have carried for 4 years, the knowledge that could have stopped this, that could have saved lives, that could have changed everything if only you had been brave enough to speak. And you realize something that steals the breath from your lungs. You cannot run anymore. Running means carrying the weight forever, means watching it grow heavier with each passing year, means dying someday with the ghosts of the innocent still clinging to your soul. Running means becoming exactly what the village already believes you are. A monster's accomplice fleeing justice while victims remain unavenged. But staying means losing him. Staying means watching the man you love sail away into an uncertain future, knowing you might never see him again, knowing that your choice has severed the bond that has defined your existence for 4 years. Staying means facing the Lord's wrath alone, armed only with the truth you have hoarded like a miser counting coins. Elric sees the conflict in your eyes. He reads it as clearly as he reads the stars that guide him across open water. And for a moment, just a moment, you see something flicker across his face that might be understanding. He knows. He has always known, perhaps, that this moment would come, that the woman who loved him despite everything would eventually find the limit of that love, the line she could not cross, the price she could not pay. He releases your hands slowly, deliberately, like a man setting down something precious that no longer belongs to him. You speak until dawn bleeds through the windows, painting the room in shades of rose and gold that seem to mock the darkness of your words. You tell him everything, every doubt and fear and treacherous thought you have hidden behind the mask of loyal wife. You tell him about the faces that haunt your dreams, the chorus of the dead that grows louder with each passing month. You tell him about the guilt that has become your constant companion, the weight that presses down on your chest until breathing feels like an act of defiance. You tell him about the magistrate's office you have walked past 1,000 times, imagining yourself climbing those steps, opening that door, laying out every secret like cards on a gambling table. You tell him you almost did it 3 times, 3 separate occasions when the burden became so heavy that betrayal seemed like mercy. He listens without interrupting. His face is a mask carved from salt-weathered stone, revealing nothing of the storm you know must be raging beneath. The candle burns down to a stub, then gutters out entirely, leaving you in the grey half-light of early morning. When you finish, the silence stretches between you like a rope pulled tight enough to snap. trap. Then he speaks. His voice is quiet, stripped of the authority that commands men to risk their lives for his ambitions. He sounds tired, ancient, like a man who has lived too long and seen too much. He tells you that you are not wrong. The words strike you like a physical blow. You expected rage, expected accusations, expected the cold fury of a predator discovering weakness in its mate. You did not expect this weary acceptance, this acknowledgement of truths you thought he would never admit. He tells you about his own ghosts, the ones he has never named, never spoken of, never allowed to surface in the presence of his crew or his wife. The 43 souls from the passenger ship are only the latest additions to a gallery of horrors that stretches back years, decades, an entire lifetime of choices that seem justified in the moment and revealed their true cost only later. He tells you he is tired, tired of running, tired of killing, tired of watching good people die for his vengeance against a lord who probably does not even remember his father's face, tired of becoming the very monster he set out to destroy. He takes your hands again, and this time his grip is gentle, almost reverent. He tells you that he will not ask you to run. He will not ask you to carry his sins any further than you already have. If you choose to stay, if you choose to speak the truth that has been choking you for years, he will not blame you. But he asks for one thing, one night, one final night together before the dawn brings whatever consequences it must bring. One night to remember what it felt like when love was still innocent, when the future still seemed full of possibility, when two broken people found comfort in each other's arms. You look into his eyes and you see the boy he used to be, the shipwright's apprentice with the crooked smile, the dreamer who spoke of distant lands and orange groves, the wounded soul who chose violence because he knew no other path to healing. You say yes. Morning arrives with the sound of church bells, but they are not ringing for prayer. They are ringing warning, alarm, the frantic clanging that announces danger approaching from the sea. You rise from the bed where you have not slept, where you have spent the night wrapped in arms that held you like something precious, something worth protecting, something that might dissolve if released too soon. Elric is already at the window, his body tense with the alertness of a man who has survived by recognizing threats before they fully materialize. The grey light illuminates his profile, the strong jaw, the weathered skin, the new scar that will never fully heal. Ships on the horizon, 3 of them flying the colors of the Eastern Province. The Lord has arrived. There is no time for tears, no time for the long goodbye you imagined during the endless hours of darkness. Elric pulls on his boots with the efficiency of a man preparing for battle, checks the blade at his hip, gathers the few items he cannot leave behind. He pauses at the door, turning back to look at you one final time. The words he speaks are not what you expect. He does not say goodbye. He does not make promises that both of you know cannot be kept. Instead, he gives you something far more valuable. He gives you permission. Tell them everything, he says. Every raid, every treasure, every hidden cove and secret passage. Tell them where the ship is anchored. Tell them the names of the 8 souls still loyal to a dying cause. Tell them whatever they need to hear to believe that you were a victim, not a partner. Give them the Black Wolf and save yourself. You open your mouth to protest, but he silences you with a gesture. There is no cruelty in his eyes, no accusation, no betrayal. Only love. Weary and wounded, but still burning, still real, still the same love that made you say yes on those cliffs 4 years ago. He tells you that this is his gift to you, the only gift he has left to give, a chance to start over, to become someone new, to build a life free from the weight of his choices. Then he is gone, slipping through the back door into the maze of alleys that lead to the harbor, to the hidden cove, to the black-sailed ship that has been his home and his curse. You stand in the silence of your small house, feeling the absence of him like a wound torn fresh. The church bells continue their frantic ringing. Shouts rise from the village below as soldiers pour from the approaching ships. The moment of choice has arrived at last. You think of all the ghosts who have accompanied you through these 4 years of complicity. You think of the faces that will never grow old, the voices that were silenced too soon, the lives that were stolen to feed one man's hunger for vengeance. You think of the woman you used to be and the woman you have become. Then you open the door and walk toward the magistrate's office, carrying the truth that will finally set you free. Behind you, somewhere beyond the harbor walls, you hear the distant thunder of cannons. The sea is claiming its debts at last, and as tears stream down your face, you cannot tell if you are mourning the man you loved or celebrating the death of the monster he became. Perhaps there is no difference. Perhaps there never was.